was to go to my grandma and grandpa's house. And I loved crushing cans. They had this can crushing machine. I don't even know what it's called. I don't know if it's just called a can crusher. But it was mounted on the wall in their garage. And so I would go to their house and I would be like, "Do you have cans?" And Grandpa would say, "Yeah, I've got cans." So then I would go out and I would put the cans in the thing, crush the cans, and then once the trash bag is full of cans, we took them to the redemption center. And once we got the money for however much cans we had, my grandpa and I and my brother, we would do the same thing every time. We would go to the local 7-Eleven and we would get Slurpees, right? I mean, what kid doesn't love Slurpees? Or if you're in my case, I called them burpees all the time. I don't know why. But that's what we did. We crushed cans, we got the money, and then we went and we went to 7-Eleven. And I loved that time. I loved that memory of just being able to reflect back and think about my grandpa and me and spending that time together. And then I moved to the state of Iowa. Illinois, we don't have this, but in Iowa, man, you got to pay that 5 cents on every can of soda that you're going to buy, or every bottle of pop, or every bottle of water that you buy. You got to pay the 5-cent deposit fee, and then you got to take it to the redemption center because you paid the 5 cents beforehand, and now you're trying to get it back, and it might not be as joyous, right? And sometimes we might just pick up the bottles on the side of the road or whatever, but some of them say, "No refill, no return." Right? And that means that they can't be redeemed. You can't do anything with them. It's just kind of, you're like, what's the point? I paid 5 cents and now I can't get that money back. What's the point? Right? Well, I'm kind of sure that Naomi felt that way a little bit, right? As we've been studying through the book of Ruth, Naomi was really bitter at this time. She was angry. She didn't think that there was a point of her being able to be redeemed and to be bought back, and that she was just going to have to live life the way that she's living life. So this morning, we're going to talk about the Redeemer. We finally get to the point in which we get to talk about the Redeemer. A couple weeks ago I talked about it and I said that it was a male relative who had the privilege or had the responsibility to take care of a family member who was in trouble or in need or in danger. And that was their role. But really the role of a redeemer was so much more. The role of a redeemer was, if a family member had been sold as a slave, the redeemer had to go buy back that family member. Or if a family member had passed away, then the redeemer, he would marry the widow and he would provide an heir so that the family name could continue being passed on and they wouldn't be erased. But the redeemer also had another role. It had the role of being able to buy land from somebody, from the family member. If they were thinking, well, I got to sell my property and I don't have anybody to sell it to, I'm going to sell it to an outside person. The Redeemer had the ability to go buy that land from that person and say, no, it's going to stay in the family, it'll be good. And so this morning we get to look at Boaz, and as we continue to look at that story, we get to look at how he takes the process in going about redeeming Ruth. And so this morning we're going to be in Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. If you want to flip there, then that would be great. But as you know by now, it'll be on the screen as well. But this morning we're going to look at that process. We're going to look at exactly how Boaz redeems Ruth and what that means for you and I as well. So starting in chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, this is what we can read. It says this. It says, "Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, 'Come over here, my friend, and sit down.' So he went over and sat down. Boaz then took 10 elders of the town and said, 'Sit here.' And they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, 'Naomi has come back from Moab and is selling a piece of land that had belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring that matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so.' But if you will not tell me, so that I will. For no one has the right to do it except for you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. Then Boaz said, on the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this time, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it. It is because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now in early times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was a method of legalizing transactions in Israel. On a quick side note, wouldn't that be really interesting if we still did that? Like if I sold my home and I just took off my shoe and said, here you go, like you own my house, that'd be really interesting. Verse 8, it says this. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are the witnesses that I have brought from Naomi all the from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's wife, widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his people or from his hometown. Today you are my witnesses. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord to make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together build up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may the family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So this is what we get, okay? So we get the transaction. Wouldn't that be really interesting really on a side note though, that'd be really interesting if we had to make all sales legal through taking off a sandal and giving it to somebody. I know I'm hung up on that, but that'd be really interesting. Like going to Walmart and saying, I'm buying my groceries, like here you go. Like that'd be really interesting. I'm just saying. But it's really interesting, okay? The guardian redeemer has to have some stuff, okay? There's a requirement to be a redeemer, okay? I can't just come along and redeem anybody's land. So if Rick and I are just really good friends, I can't say, hey, I'm going to come along and I'm redeeming Rick's land, because there's got to be some stuff that makes that possible, okay? The first thing is the guardian redeemer has to be a blood relative. He has to be a blood relative. The guardian redeemer then must be able to redeem it, and then he has to be willing to redeem also. And so Boaz does all this. The first one that we're told is that we get clear-cut evidence that Boaz is a blood relative from the chapter 2 of Ruth, when we're told this. It says, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. But then Naomi goes on to tell Ruth that this man is a close relative of ours. He is our guardian. He's one of our guardian redeemers. So right there, we get told, hey, Boaz is a blood relative. So Boaz is good. He got number 1 checked off. He's good. But as we learned last week, when Boaz was trying to propose, he said, well, there's another one. There's another redeemer. And he's actually closer. And so this other man was also a blood relative. We don't know what his name is. He must not have been that significant, I guess, to not get named. But we don't know his name. So this other guy, he was a blood relative. He was actually closer, and family-wise, than Boaz was to Ruth. So he says, hey, we're going to get this process started. I'm going to call this guy, we're going to get this process started. So they're at the town gate, and he's like, hey, here we go. And so they get the process going. But then he has to be able to redeem, right? So not only was he a blood relative, not only were both men, Boaz and this other no-name guy, not only were they both blood relatives, they both have to be able to redeem. So here it is, right? We know that Naomi's selling this property. I don't know how much the land it was. I don't know how much of an acre, how much it cost per acre. I'm sure it wasn't $8,000. I'm sure it wasn't $15,000 per acre. I don't know how much it was, but they had to be able to pay for it, right? And so we know that both men were probably able to pay for it. Boaz seemed to be really, really wealthy, as we could tell that he had fields and he was able to give some stuff away. He probably was pretty wealthy. And so is this other guy. He seems to be wealthy. He says, hey, I got it. I can buy the land. That's cool. So they both seem to be able to pay the price. They both seem to be able to pay and redeem the land. But then Boaz slips in another thing. He says, oh, by the way, not only are you getting the land, you also get Ruth. At that notion, the guy says, whoa, hold up a second, buddy. Wait a second. Okay? The land's cool, but I don't want her. Like, I don't need the lady. That might endanger my estate. He might not have actually he might not have any kids himself. So if he marries Ruth, and she gets pregnant before his own wife, all of his property now goes to Ruth. And then he loses his part. And so he says, whoa, I can't do that, buddy. I can't. You have her, okay? You take her. I don't want any part of that. And so that goes to the third part. And so they have to be willing to redeem. So Boaz and Mr. No Name, they're blood relatives. And they're both able to redeem. But one's not willing to redeem, and Boaz is. So he says, okay, you take her. And at that notion, Boaz is like, okay, that's cool, I'll take her. That's excellent. And so Boaz is Ruth's kinsman redeemer. He is the kinsman redeemer of the Old Testament. He kind of acts like a type of Christ, okay? Not to say that Boaz is Jesus. He's not. He's resembling what Jesus does for us in the New Testament. He's a type of Christ. He shows us what Jesus is going to do. Jesus in the New Testament is going to redeem us. And we know that because we were here this morning, and hopefully those who are watching will know that as well. But Jesus himself had to fulfill all three roles of a kinsman redeemer. As you know, Jesus, probably isn't, a brother. He's not like me and my brothers. We're not blood, but he is, in a sense, a blood relative. When Jesus became a son of man, he became of us. He became flesh and blood. He became a human being when he stepped out of heaven to come on earth. And John chapter 1 and verse 14 tells us this when it says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory and the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus became a blood relative. Jesus became a blood relative in the fact that he decided that he was going to come in the form of in God's creation. He was going to become like one of us. Not only was he full of glory, but he was also full of human. He was just like you and I. He had the same feelings. He fled. He got upset. He was just like us. He became a blood relative. He became like a brother to us. He became a king. He was able to fulfill that first quality. Jesus checks off the first quality of a redeemer. But Jesus had to be able to redeem as well. For us to be redeemed, we had to have a perfect sacrifice. Before in the Old Testament, they would bring in an animal and they would sacrifice the animal. And the animal, though, couldn't have any blemishes. Couldn't have anything wrong. It had to be the firstborn. It had to be perfect. And so, if it had a blemish, if it had something that was wrong with it, it was no good. It couldn't be used as a sacrifice. So Jesus came to be that perfect sacrifice. We couldn't have asked for anything else. We couldn't have done anything else. We needed something that was perfect, that had no blemishes. That's what Jesus does. Jesus took the punishment that you and I fully well deserve of dying on the cross, and he did that. Because he was the only one who's able to. Jesus was the only one who's ever lived who's perfect. He's the only one to claim that he's perfect out Out of everybody ever, He's the only one. Not once did He break God's law. Not once did He break any of God's commandments. Not once did He do anything that was out of line or crazy or silly. Not once. He was perfect. And Jesus was the sacrifice that we needed. So Jesus is able to redeem us. We're told this in 1 Peter chapter 1 in verse 18 through 20. It says this about Jesus paying the price for us. It says, "For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but it was the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake." So Jesus is able to redeem us because of His blood. It wasn't something that you or I have done. It was because of His precious blood. We weren't redeemed with gold. We weren't bought back with silver. But it was the shedding of Jesus' blood that bought us back. And this was all set into place before the world was even created. Jesus knew that this was going to happen. Jesus knew that He was going to be able to pay for us. But then there's one more thing. And the Redeemer has to be willing to redeem, right? And Jesus was clearly willing to redeem for us. If a person isn't willing to redeem something, there would be no use for it, right? If Boaz or if this other guy was the only Redeemer and he says, "Well, I'm not willing to redeem Ruth," she would have been stuck in the same position, right? She would have been stuck in the same position of working and trying to figure out how she's going to work and how she's going to make do and how she was going to have a life and how was the family name going to get passed down. She would have had to continue to worry about that. But Boaz is willing. If Jesus wasn't willing to die for us, then we would be in a terrible, terrible position. There would be absolutely no way for us to really come close to God. Our sin would keep us from Him. Our sin would keep us from the presence of God. There'd be no way without a perfect sacrifice that we'd be able to spend all of eternity with Jesus. There'd be no way. In fact, if there was no perfect sacrifice, if Jesus wasn't willing to buy us back so that we could come to God, we'd be facing eternal death. We'd be facing an eternity separated from God. So we know that Jesus is willing to do that. In the book of John, in chapter 15 and verse 13, we're told this. It says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down your life for one's friends." What great way to show love. What great way to show that you're willing to redeem God's people than to say, "I'm going to lay down my life for them. I'm going to lie down my life so that they can have life." There's no doubt that Jesus is willing to do it. In the garden, Jesus prays, "God, if there's a way, then let's do something different. But if there's not any way, there's no way to pass this cup, Lord. I'll take it." Jesus, at any point during His crucifixion, could have said, "Hey, this is too painful, we're done, like no more, I'm coming down, stop it." But not once did He do that. He continued through the act. Jesus, there's no way of denying that Jesus was willing to pay for us and to buy us back. Jesus was willing to shed His blood for us. He didn't shed the blood of something else. He didn't shed the blood of a perfect lamb or pigeons or anything like that, or a dove. He shed His own blood. And in the book of Hebrews, chapter 9 and verse 12, this is what we're told about the redemption that we get from Jesus. He did not enter by the means of goats and calves, but He entered the most holy place once and for all by His own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. So Jesus was willing and able to pay. Jesus was a blood relative. He was a human in flesh. Jesus redeemed us. He was willing to redeem us. Jesus becomes our kinsman redeemer so that we could have eternal redemption. Jesus bought us from our slavery to sin. before Jesus died on the cross, we were held captive to our sin. We would be sold to spend an eternity in hell. And Jesus said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna buy them back. I'm gonna redeem them from themselves. And He buys us from our slavery. He buys us from spending an eternity without Him. And He pulls us back to Him. So, Boaz redeems Ruth. Jesus redeems us. What does that have to do with us today? Well, I mean, we could walk out of here knowing, hey, that's pretty peachy and that's perfect and great. But what does that do with us today? What impact does that have? And actually, redemption has a lot of impact for us. Redemption has impact for Ruth as well. Redemption in the first process brings new life. It restores life. And so Boaz, he takes off his sandal, right? He kicks off his shoe and he says, I'm totally going to do this, by the way. So he kicks off his shoes and he says, here you go. You're done. I bought you. This is actually my shoe, by the way. So he takes off his shoes and he says, you're mine. And he restores Ruth. He gives her life. He takes her home and marries her. That's where we're told. He restores Naomi's lineage. He bears a child with Ruth that we'll see next week. And he gives Ruth restored life. In the same way, Jesus does the same thing for us, right? Before we're living, and it's just life. We might not have a purpose. We might be a little banged up. We might be chipped, right? We might have a little bit of chip pain. It's kind of like a restored car. I don't know much about that. But I've seen, when I was looking for my first car, I saw a 69 Shelby. It was in terrible shape. It needed to be restored horribly. But you've seen that process, right? It's beat up. It's rusty. It's tore down. And Jesus comes in and says, let me rub that rust off. Let me restore that paint. Let me freshen you up. Let me rebuild you so that you're perfect. So Jesus restores our life as well. He gives us restored life. Secondly, He gives us witness, right? Boaz, he calls the men over, he calls the elders, and he says, hey, I need people to witness this. I need you guys to see that I'm doing this. I want you guys to be able to tell others that I'm doing this. And so he has the men come so that they could see that He's redeeming Ruth. In the same way, Jesus gives us witness as well. We get to go and tell people, hey, this is what God's doing in my life. This is what God's doing with me. This is what God's done. And we bear witness. In Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, we're told this about bearing witness. It says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all of Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Right? We're supposed to be Jesus' witnesses to Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the world. So for us, Jerusalem is right here in our midst. It's our close friends, family, neighbors, co-workers. It's those people close to you, right? And then Judah, those are a little bit more distant. Maybe it's someone from a different town. Maybe it's someone from the other end of the town. Maybe it's someone who's standing before you at the line of the store. Maybe it's the person who's out in front of the store who's asking for a little bit of help. Maybe it's the person sitting in the pew across from you. But that's Judah, that's a little bit out. In Samaria, it's the same way. It's a little bit out. And then Samaria, it's a little bit more out, I guess. Maybe it's a perfect person from a different state, different country, different part of the country. I don't know. It's a little bit more further out. And then we all know what the ends of the earth are, right? Out. Continually out. So we're supposed to be Jesus' witness to what He's done and all the power that He has. And then redemption does the last thing. It brings new life. Next week we'll pick back up at chapter 4 and verse 13. But in verse 13 it says that Ruth and Boaz get married. He goes home and he takes Ruth as his wife. He gives her a new life. She gives birth to a son. She gets a new life, a new home. He no longer has to worry about the old. At the same time, we also inherit new life. When Jesus died and paid the price on the cross for us, we inherited a new life. When we become baptized and when we die to ourselves and we're raised down a new creation, we get new life. We're raised up in a life in Him. And so we get new life. Through Jesus' redemption, we inherit new life. So this morning as we prepare to leave, we know that Boaz redeems Ruth just as Jesus redeems us. Just as Boaz bought Ruth back, Jesus bought us as well. Jesus took us out of our slavery and called us back to Him. And through Jesus, our lives get restored. We inherit this witness, but we also inherit new life. And so this morning as we prepare to leave, know that we've been bought at a price. That price was the life of Jesus Christ. It was His blood that bought us. It was the price that He was willing to pay to redeem us. He became our Redeemer. He became a blood relative to us. He was able to pay for our price through His perfect living and His perfect life. But He was also willing to pay that price for you and I this morning so that we could be here. This morning I'm going to invite our musicians to come back forward as we prepare for our invitation song. But this morning, know that you've been bought at a price. This morning, you were bought out of slavery. You are no longer a slave, but you've been restored. God's restoring your life. He's making you a witness to what He's done and the power that He has. And He's giving you a new life. This morning, know that Jesus placed His life on the line for you and for I and for all of us this morning. And this morning, I invite you as we stand to sing our invitation song that if you have a need, if you have something that you want to talk about, something to pray about, whatever it is, it's a long song this morning. I'll be on the front pew. You can come and talk to me about it, any of it, as we stand and sing. So this week we have board meeting this week is Wednesday at 7:30. Oh, we have youth group tonight at 5. Check it.